Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Impact investing has become a significant player in the world of finance, with $502 billion in assets under management globally. Women have played and they continue to play critical roles in shaping every facet of the sector. In comparison to traditional finance, women are better represented in ESG investing. Today, I have the pleasure of being joined by three incredible women who are going to help me dissect the role of African women in impact investing as investors, entrepreneurs, and leaders. First on the panel, I have Miriam Esther Desano, who is the coordinator of affirmative finance action for women in Africa with the African Development Bank. And then I also have Abby, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the African Private Equity and Venture Capital Association, and Jessica Robinson, who's the founder and MD of Moxie Future, also author of Financial Feminism, A Woman's Guide to Investing for a Sustainable Future. Ladies, thank you so much for joining me today and welcome. To kickstart, let's get into some stats. Perhaps Esther, from your point of view, you can share with us some of the impact entrepreneurs in terms of women in the continent. What are the statistics and how are we pairing in comparison to the rest of the world?
Thank you so much, Patty. So I think in Africa, women entrepreneurs fare better in some instances than in other regions in the world, in the sense that we start businesses at a much faster pace than in other regions. However, as much as we start businesses faster, we also face significant challenges when it comes to accessing finance in order to grow those businesses, but even more so to get them to the level whereby they can employ or create jobs on the continent.
Great, it's interesting and I guess helpful that we have Abby here who can help us maybe with the statistics in terms of investments towards impact investing for women. Abby, what's your take on that? And also supporting what Esther is saying, that it's easy for us to establish these businesses, but in terms of investing or getting funding for them, it often is very difficult. So if you could maybe take us through your understanding of the space and the statistics that you have.
Oh, thank you, Patty. So I guess if the question is, are women as represented as men in the impact investment space? I think we all know naturally the answer is no, but the representation has been increasing over the past few years, which is definitely a positive thing. We're seeing more investors, more female investors become more prominent in not only the impact investing, but also in the traditional general investment space as well, which is really encouraging. If I can just refer to the IFC report that was done in 2019 called Moving Towards Gender Balance in P and VC, and the report revealed that 12% of senior investment professionals across private equity and venture capital were women. And this was a really great signal to the industry because it was really positive, because historically you haven't had that much female representation in these senior roles in P and VC. So I guess that's the first thing I wanted to signpost, to just show how positive the evolution has been over the past few years. Then on, if we look a little bit at the fund managers, the dynamics of the fund managers, to your point about how, you know, there's a dearth of financing for female entrepreneurs. Part of that is because if you don't have enough, if you don't have adequate gender representation on the investment side, the likelihood is that finance won't cascade to some of these female businesses. So it's really important for us to push for that gender diversity on the investment side. And we're seeing that evolution occurring over the past 5 years. There's been more focus on gender lens investing. More generalist fund managers have been incorporating gender into their investment approach, which again is really positive. If we look at our data, we are tracking about 40 gender lens investment fund managers that invest in Africa, which again, I don't have the data from 10 years ago, but I'm fairly certain that those wouldn't have been the numbers. So we've seen a lot of increase there. And these are fund managers that are raising funds that are targeted at investing in female-led businesses or investing in teams that are gender balanced. So that's on the PE side, or the later stage investment side, that we have that, which is positive. If we then look at, and if to give you an example, these are funds like Lithia Identity. We've also got Arua Capital that's focused on investing in female-led businesses. And then if we look closer towards the early stage investment space, you know, naturally VC has gained a lot of traction over the past 2 years. And in the same vein, we have some fund managers that are raising VC funds that are targeted at women as well, which is amazing. An example of that is Django, the Senegalese fund manager. But what's interesting is our data, when we interrogate where this capital is going, into what sort of businesses. So the early stage investment, our data shows that 20% of VC investments in Africa in 2020 were in early stage companies with a female founder or multiple founders that included at least one female. And then further, our data also shows that 11% of VC investments in the same period were in early stage companies with a female CEO. So we're seeing from the entrepreneurship side, we're seeing more investments going into female founders, and also from the traditional organization, we're seeing more investments going into businesses that have women as part of their leadership. So definitely positive. I'll stop there. But we can talk a little bit later about kind of the LP representation from the institutional investor side as well.
Great, thank you for that. That's actually quite encouraging because, you know, when you are in it from an entrepreneur's point of view, and you're struggling to get funding, you don't always see the overall picture that you have access to. So thank you for sharing that with us. Jessica, let me come to you. I want us to talk a little bit about women and wealth. What are the main trends that are happening and how is this affecting the investment world?
Sure. So I think it's really important to really focus on these strong emerging trends and therefore what we can do with this, you know, in terms of building the impact investment industry, particularly in Africa. I mean, the heartening news is that women now control, you know, a significant chunk of the world's private wealth. You know, we're looking around 32%, and this is growing annually. It's expected to double every decade. So, you know, and this is a worldwide phenomenon. The other interesting thing to note is that this is increasingly self-generated. So women are very much economic powerhouses. We create, we control, and we influence a huge amount of this wealth. At the same time, we're seeing that more women are coming into the workplace, you know, particularly in the financial industry. And I'm very heartened by Abby's stats that she's just shared with us, because actually it's demonstrating, while the numbers are still small, they are improving. And I think that gives us a huge sort of impetus for encouraging more and more women in all regions to be in the financial industry, as this is so critical to developing the types of products, the type of analysis that many women as investors are looking for. You know, that redirection of corporate strategies, defining services, you know, that are increasingly tailored to women. And again, I think, you know, the news is good on that front. The third trend that's really relevant to what we're talking about today on impact investing is that there's increasing evidence that women, when they're making investment decisions, genuinely care about the bigger picture. So there's a lot of research out there, and we have actually done some global research which interviewed women from a number of countries all across the world, and we found that 83% of women surveyed genuinely care about where their money is invested, and 69% feel a sense of urgency to invest responsibly. So with all this change underway, it's all sort of leading in the same direction. And in terms of the dynamics and how that's impacting on the investment industry, you know, I think many of the financial institutions are really waking up to the opportunity that women as investors represent, and they're becoming increasingly active. We see that in terms of the growth of investor networks of women investing in women. You know, we've touched on a bit of the gender lens investing, which we'll explore later. But I think it's worth recognizing the movement that's actually happening all across the world. We still have a long way to go, but I think there are some significant trends happening there.
Great. Is this the reason why you decided to write your book, Financial Feminism?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, my day job's in sustainable finance, but I've always been overwhelmed, and I've lived and worked all over the world, by the number of women who approach me in a professional capacity and say, well, what can I do with my money in a personal capacity? So the problem we have is that many women feel disengaged from the financial industry. So we need to do a better job at really connecting with what women as investors want. And this is where impact and sustainable investing is so critical.
Okay, wow. You've alluded to this being a global phenomenon. I want to maybe go back to Esther and Abby. What are the regional trends that we can observe, and what about Africa in particular?
So thanks again. I'm actually very heartened by the data that both Jessica and Abby referred to, because interestingly enough, in Africa, though, I think overall impact investing is making its way through, but I want to say it's making it in a perhaps timid manner for a number of different reasons. Very often we hear both from impact investors as well as even traditional, financial players, that as much as they see the opportunity for the women's market, the types of women entrepreneurs that they would want to invest in have a tendency not to be found. Or if they are in very small numbers, which at times, makes them wonder whether, it's worth taking the risk. And we've heard it both from, funds that are managed by women and who are saying that, instead of just focusing on entities that are led by women only, they have expanded their reach, just because focusing on the market alone may not be as lucrative as they had expected it, or would take a long time. And so what that causes to think about, or pushes to do, is to start, if you will, grooming more women, and to first of all ensure that we're focusing on the right market segment, sizing that market segment so that the types of investment decisions that need to be made are made. But we're also coming to the point where we really need to now feed our market so that these impact investors can reach, or can have a bigger pool of demand to pick from. And interestingly enough, very recently, we were looking at data from COVID, which zoomed in even more on that, in the fact that the majority of these enterprises that we're talking about are enterprises that are not formal. They are very, very small and remain in the informal sector. And so if we're now pushing impact investors to look at the women's market, we also need to ensure that we're looking at this issue and putting the right training, the right tools, etc., to ensure that we have a much bigger pool of women entrepreneurs that are strong, that impact investors will want to look at.
I couldn't agree more. Abby, maybe coming to you, what do you think the financial industry can do to help these women be fundable and investable?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think the interventions have to cut across the three layers. So I think, the intentionality starts at the LP, so at the institutional investor level. And then there's also work to be done at the fund manager level. And obviously there's work to be done at the portfolio company and founder level. So if I start with the latter, so I have a different view. I think there are loads of, these women with opportunity, with business ideas, with potential, perhaps as Esther mentioned, with ideas that aren't necessarily scalable at this point. And yes, as we all know, 80% of the women-led businesses on the continent, they're informal businesses. So there's that aspect of informality. My view is that in itself presents a gap in the market. for organizations to come and incubate some of these ideas or to accelerate some of these businesses, provide them to Esther's point with some of the technical assistance, provide them with the know-how so that they might be able to strengthen their business operations, formalize their ideas so that they can then attract, whether it's pre-seed or seed stage funding, and then we build the deal funnel that way. So at the very early stage, there's some work to be done around just strengthening the portfolio companies. Additionally, I think there's work to be done in fully established companies where women are employees. So not looking at the founder perspective, but looking where women are employees, that there should be some work and support given to help them ascend the corporate ladder so that they also end up in decision-making positions, because we need to tackle it two-pronged. It's not just from the entrepreneur perspective, there's also those that are in formal employment. How do they ascend to leadership positions so that they can start also, you know, your sister's keeper, they can also start, you know, whether it's signing contracts with supply chain organizations that are female-led and kind of cascade the impact that way. From the fund manager perspective, I think it's all about intentionality. It's thinking about gender lens, thinking about women, economic empowerment throughout your investment strategy. So when you bring any deal, any opportunity that you're considering, look at it through a gender lens. What impact will that have? You know, this business we're investing in, you know, the companies as part of a supply chain, are they women-led? What knock-on effect will it have on women empowerment? And thinking about it that way. And I think a lot more fund managers are thinking about that, particularly African fund managers, because they've been incorporating ESG practices into their investment approach for ages, because they're primarily funded by the DFI. So it's been a requirement. So the S part of the ESG, a lot more fund managers are thinking through their investment decisions and through a gender lens, which is great and very positive. And I think also at the fund manager level, more work and intention has to be done to ensuring that there is senior representation, so that there are women in kind of senior positions, senior investment officers, that there are women as part of investment committees, because the likelihood is if you have women that are part of the origination teams, their networks will be a lot wider than, you know, men. So if you want to be able to source these diamonds in the rough, or these gems, these female companies, you need to do it with a wider network. So you need to have some of these women in key positions, key investment positions at the GP level. And finally, at the institutional investor level, I think the work that the 2X Challenge has been doing has been fantastic, which is, you know, the G7 DFIs coming together to mobilize 3 billion to invest in women-led businesses towards women economic empowerment. It's been great because they exceeded that challenge. They've now set an even bigger challenge of 15 billion by 2022, I think it is. So I think initiatives like this that are basically showing from an institutional investor perspective, they're going to back fund managers, they're going to do direct investments that have positive economic empowerment for women. I think this is also positive.
Great. We've touched at length what institutions in this ecosystem can do to help women. What advice from the three of you, I'll give you each a 10, can you give a woman or women who want to engage more in the impact investing space?
So I think from our end, and the program that the African Development Bank has put in place through AFAWA actually encompasses everything that Abby has just mentioned. And so in order for it to work, it is really critical that not only do financial institutions need to put everything in place and ensure that women from the leadership all the way down the line are well represented and put in a situation where they can make decisions or influence, for sure, the decisions. But I think it's also important that women entrepreneurs as well, if you will, further develop the relationship that they have with the financial industry. And here it's whether we're talking about commercial banks, whether we're talking about impact investing funds, there is still a bit of reticence from women themselves. And I think trusting, there's a perception of the industry that women have. And that in a way also is an impediment to their ability to access the funding that is available to them. Because to Abby's point, it really has to be a two-pronged approach. And so for me, the advice for women entrepreneurs will be understand the financial industry, pinpoint who is the best financial partner for you, and then move forward.
I mean, I can follow on from Esther's point in terms of when we talk about how to engage women as impact investors. And, you know, one of the questions I quite often get asked is why did you not write a book for men? Why were you focused on women? And I think, you know, sustainable and impact investing is clearly not just for women, right? It's not a man versus a woman issue. What we're trying to do is address this relationship that women have with the financial industry, whether it's one of perception, I'm not an investor, or whether it's one of, as we talk about female entrepreneurs, you know, there's sometimes we know that female entrepreneurs are not pitching when they think they're going to get a no. So how can we build their confidence? And that's where there's that intersection between female investors and female entrepreneurs. And the point that Abby was making, I think, around investing with a gender lens, the 2X challenge, which has been phenomenal. What we are seeing some of the investors do, so there are the gender investment products, but it's actually putting that overlay of gender into sustainable and impact investing products as well. You know, we have the data, we have the evidence, so it's really all there for us to do. I think, you know, in terms of the advice, you know, this relationship again with the financial industry, they need to do a better job. We need to focus on financial literacy, you know, doing things to support women. I think, you know, leveraging the sort of the tech developments, fintech platforms that are coming out. I mean, I'm always concerned because fintech is so male dominated that we're designing solutions with a male default lens. And I think we need to start calling that out a bit to ensure that these types of platforms actually address what women are needing, both as investors, but also in seeking capital as well. And the other thing, of course, is having these conversations. The more and more that women come together in a peer-to-peer discussion, the more their confidence grows and the more they feel able to connect with other female investors and actually go out and find these female founders as well. And I think that's certainly something I've seen firsthand in the last couple of years. And I think it has a huge amount of potential in emerging markets and, you know, in Africa and other markets as well.
And Abby?
So my advice or my suggestion would be for the fund managers that engage in impact investing, also for the entrepreneurs. So on the fund manager side, it would be not to regard impact as separate to return. The two can coexist, and you can, as they say, you can do well while doing good. And I think having that mentality on the upfront, I think at the onset, I think is important. So not only just striving for return, but also striving for impact as well, and vice versa. I think also investors need to take a collective responsibility to build out the ecosystem. So along the lines of exactly what Esther had said that the AFAWA program is doing, because I think, you know, that pipeline is really important, because if you spend enough time building the ecosystem, then, you know, the pipeline is robust enough that you can just move them along the kind of deal pipelines. So I think spending time supporting that ecosystem, and I think doing so also by sharing success stories. So even as we're discussing now, I think there's a power in sharing success stories. There's so many great female entrepreneurs who are doing fantastic things that we just don't hear that much about. For instance, to Jessica's point about fintech being completely flooded by male entrepreneurs, that's so true. The other day I read about Okra. They're a fintech provider in Nigeria led by a female founder who's also the CTO. You rarely hear of women being CTOs for these fintech companies. So I think, you know, evangelizing, storytelling, and just kind of doing that, I think is really important. On the entrepreneur side, I completely agree with everything Jessica and Esther have said. I think they need to be clear about matching the finance they require with the stage of business that they're in. I think when they're going to pitch, they need to be very clear about the impact what the impact is, because if you're going to an impact investor and you're pitching to an impact investor, they need to understand the impact matrices. They need to understand what that is. So I think having that very clear and solid and at the forefront when you do your pitch is really important. And I think, I think just be clear on your pitch, be clear on your need, and get your ducks in a row as much as possible. So before you approach, particularly an equity investor, get your ducks in a row, have your back office sorted out, have your corporate governance in place if you require that for the stage of financing you're going after, and be as ready as possible so that when you get the opportunity and you engage with impact investors, you put your best foot forward.
Incredible insights from you ladies. Thank you so much. I think from my side, maybe two things that I just want to add on to that. It's interesting that we do come up with these solutions in terms of support, but I have to agree with you that women don't often take them up. I work very closely with ARA. You'll see that every time there's a call for startups or entrepreneurs, a majority men. So I don't know how one can solve that, but maybe just to the women themselves, we really need to come out of our shells and make use of the available funds. We can't put ecosystems, funding and support together, and then the recipients that we've tailor-made them for are not there. So thank you so much for such a great session. I hope that whoever is going to be watching this will get the right insights that they're looking for.